Yeah, old school. That's what I'm talking about. Listen, this ain't for everybody. Some of y'all need to hear this. I know you're in the trenches fighting, but check it out. I'm gonna put it down like this so I can help the saints understand. Everything you're going through is all part of the master plan. Or what? You thought cause you got saved everything was gonna be peaches and cream? You better wake up, son. Don't nothing come to a sleeper but a dream. Faith without works is dead. Read your Bible, you know what it said. He who don't work don't eat. Blackers don't get fed. Yeah, Jesus said he who puts his hand to the plow looks back the same ain't fit. Some of y'all ain't been in the trenches 5 minutes and you about ready to quit. I ain't mad at ya, I'm just hitting you with the real. If you died for me and I was still tripping, now how you think that make you feel? Check this out, deep game, this here's deep. Some of y'all ain't sawing nothing but you studied trying to reach. But unto him who is able to possess your fathers by his glory. Struggles might be part of your testimony, but it ain't the end of the story. Now upon this was prophesied way back in the day. Choir, sing the hook right here and see if the church can relate.
I know we can make it. Oh, we can make it. I know good and well. God can work it out. He'll work it out. Work it out. Yeah, he'll work it out. I know we can make it. We can make it. I know good and well. God can work it out. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yeah.
Thinking not strange, the fiery trials wanted to try you. You say, why you? But your church say, what would Jesus do? Why you asking if he ain't trying to do what he's saying? He told you he was going to have tribulations, but you thought he was playing. 1 minute you're telling how good God is and can't nobody beat the talk. The next minute you're backsliding so fast, it's like you're moonwalking. Oh yeah, I'm preaching to myself because I ain't no better. It ain't like I've been following his every word, obeying it to the letter. But we soldiers, we got to remember that. Regroup, stay on point. Yeah, bow down, confess, repent, stay humble, let him anoint. It ain't easy as I thought it was. I'd be lying if I told you that. But it showed up getting better all the time. Trust me, that's the fact. Ain't nothing we going through that can't be handled. God put that on his son. Like they say, you can shout now if you want to, cause the battle's already won. So while you're going through the valley, don't even trip. You're gonna be on top. Choir, sing the hook line one more again. This time you don't stop.
I know we can make it. We can make it. I know good and well. God can work it out. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. He'll work it out. We can make it. I know good.
Welcome, everyone. This is your host, Lamont Patterson. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. We definitely appreciate it. We know you could be somewhere doing something else with your time, but in actuality, I'm going to say this is where you really need to be. All right. I'd like to say right here, right now, if you have anything that's happening in your life that could help motivate, stimulate on a positive note, that could really help the people in this world in which we live, we'd like to hear about it. Hit us up. Our office number is 323-957-7322. Now, with that being said, we're going to jump into it. We're going to get right into it. We got a fantastic show lined up for you. We're definitely talking about current stuff that's going on with everybody out there, no matter where you are, where you may be. This thing is touching you. Definitely. So let me see, let all of us see, is our guest with us, Mr. Bart Édes. Are you with us, sir?
Lamont, I am with you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. I can hear you loud and clear. And thank you so much for joining us, man. We're very, very excited. We know you got a whole bunch of information to share with our listeners, man. And I would encourage everybody right now, sit down somewhere and get your note out, pencil, pad, laptop, so you can take down some of this information that I guess is going to be sharing with you. Because that's what I'm doing, even though we're going to replay the show over and over again. And if you didn't get it, you're going to get it. Bart, I'm sorry for riddling on, man, but I'm so excited to have you on the show because I know this is what everybody's talking about right today.
Lamont, you're too kind. And I would bet that I'm twice as excited about being on your show.
Oh, wow. Well, I guess we too excited, gentlemen, everybody. So, if we stumble on something, please don't hold us accountable. Right. You know what I'm saying? It's just adrenaline running. But Mr. Édes, he's a policy analyst, commentator, and the author of Learning from Tomorrow Using Strategic Foresight to Prepare for the Next Disruption, like right now. He studied the rise of Asian innovation, sustainable development goals, and transformative trends reshaping the world since 2020. He's also served as a non-resident senior associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C., and was named a distinguished fellow at the Asian Pacific Foundation of Canada in January this year, 2020. All right. In May of this year, he joined the faculty, McGill University as a professor of practice. That's that excitement jumping out, Bart.
Yeah, Lamont, thank you for that intro. I'm speaking with you and those who have joined us today from Montreal, north of the border in French Canada, and it's a real pleasure to launch into an exploration of some big ideas in the midst of this pandemic, and maybe offer a couple of ideas on how we might come out of it in a better place than when we went into it.
Right. That's great. And for those that don't know, what we're speaking on is how COVID-19's changed our lives for good. We're gonna go down that road first. So let's start there, Bart.
What COVID has changed in our lives, my goodness, and we've witnessed it firsthand, and everybody has experienced it in a different way. In North America, there's been a lot of suffering, and it's been disproportionately, disadvantaged, marginalized, poor groups who have suffered the most. The elderly, especially in the early stages of the pandemic. So it's been a tough time, and economically, in the labor market, a lot of people have lost their jobs. What I do, Lamont, is I spend a lot of time looking at big trends, and after we get through this difficult period, I'm looking ahead to what's going to happen next. What are some of the things that are going to stick around after COVID, and what might be different? And I'll throw a few provocative ideas at you just to start and see where you want to go with the conversation. But just a few thoughts on things that went away in the last 16 months and aren't likely to come back, or if they do come back, maybe not in the same full force. So an example, I would say, is companies, big corporations that are ambivalent about sustainability and work-life balance. I think companies have to take on more responsibility, care more about their staff, and realize a lot of them are burnt out and have been working from home, and that's been both good and bad. But on the good side, they've appreciated the flexibility and time with life. So companies that are kind of indifferent to work-life balance or to important sustainable issues like the environment, health, and social justice, it's going to be harder to not act in these areas. And that's just one example. I'll give you a couple other quick ones, maybe less serious, but movie theaters. There's been a long-term trend in the U.S. Where cinemas have been closing. And in COVID, obviously, a lot of them shut down, at least temporarily. But not all of them are going to come back because we got into the habit of streaming. And yeah, sure, some of us will go back to the movie, for old time's sake, but it's not going to be like before. Neighborhood mailbox is just one other thing that we were familiar with for the last many years. Those have started to disappear with greater frequency during the pandemic, and a lot of those aren't coming back. So a lot of little things are going to change and some bigger things, like fertility. I'll just end on that note for the moment. We've seen a constant decline in the birth rate in the last 6 years in the U.S. And last year, for as long as records have been kept, we hit the lowest level ever. And so we may not see a bounce back to birth rates of previous times as people worry about, will we see another pandemic or another big disruption that could make life difficult if we've got family. Let me just pause there and see what you're thinking.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm thinking kind of like all over the place. And I think one thought that's jumped out of my mind is in regards to this pandemic, based on some of the things that we know that's occurred in history, why did it seem like this country or this government was so ill prepared?
Yeah, I think we're going to be asking ourselves that question for a long time. And it's clear that the government at all levels wasn't prepared. And you could say that about, authorities, leaders in most countries around the world. And it wasn't a surprise completely that we were going to have pandemics, okay? You have these epidemiologists, health experts who for years have been warning of the possibility of a pandemic. Bill Gates, who likes to talk on big issues, he gave a TED Talk a few years ago and warned we're going to see a pandemic. And in the area, one of the areas I specialize in called Strategic Foresight, which is about trying to understand where the future might go, there was a study came out 11 years ago, sponsored by the Rockefeller Foundation, where they outlined some possible scenarios for the future. And one of them was a global pandemic that would see governments introducing all kinds of restrictions, including on travel, that there'd be more government surveillance, and that China would come out of the crisis better than most other countries. That was out of a foresight study done 11 years ago, and we saw a lot of that come true in 2020 and 2021. So to get to your question, we could have known it was coming, even if we didn't know the date or the month or the exact year. Why weren't we more prepared? And I guess the short answer, there's a longer one, but the short answer is a lot of us are kind of creatures of the moment. We have a lot going on in our lives, right? You know, we're taking care of our family and our job and aspirations for learning and growth, and there's so many, you know, risks before us, just getting across the street, you know, or other challenges we face, and it's a bit overwhelming when we don't have a particular date in mind that a pandemic may strike in the future. How do you get prepared for something like that? Wrap your head around it. Whether it's in the business community or government or society more generally, we sometimes have difficulty in preparing for changes that we're not entirely sure, or disruptions. We're not sure when they're going to hit, if they're going to hit. In this case, there was a pretty good idea it was going to. And I can tell you, Lamont, it's going to happen again. I can't tell you when, but there will be other pandemics. They may be more or less severe, hopefully less, and hopefully one of the lessons we gain out of this crisis is that we need to do better preparation. We need to be ready to pounce and put in place measures to limit its spread and get it under control.
Bart, unfortunately, I don't think they got the memo right now, still. I don't. I mean, because if you look at what's happening right now, it's going out there with this new Delta variant. I still don't think they got the memo. So, man, it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah. You know, a lot of the U.S. has kind of gotten back to life similar to the way it was in what I like to call the before times, before March of 2020, where we walked around mask-free and did what we did. But the fact is, only about half of the population in the U.S. is vaccinated, and there's now a problem of vaccine hesitancy. So people, for whatever reason, they're reluctant to get it, and that is allowing this Delta variant to spread. And the number of COVID cases in America right now is rising, not falling.
Right.
So today, I can tell you, there's about 31,000 cases a day. 7 days ago, 18,000. 14 days ago, 14,000. And about 3 weeks ago, we were seeing 11,000 cases a day. So from 11,000 cases a day, 21 days ago, we're now at 31,000. And it's just as you said, Lamont, it's the spread of this Delta variant, and it's challenging a return to something resembling normal.
Yep. Like I said, they didn't get the memo, and the ones that did is really not taking this serious. And we're going to be right back. We're going to be right back where we were a few months ago. If not worse, actually.
Yeah. So the tragedy is, again, what I was saying at the outset, the people who suffer the most from this are those, with the fewest means, to deal with it. These are, people struggling in jobs, maybe low-paying jobs without job security, and communities that have been hard hit. If you're flush with cash, you find a way to work your way out of most any problem. And so there's what I'm saying is there's the inequality that existed in the U.S. before the pandemic. It was made worse by this pandemic. And the longer it goes on, it's poorer communities that are going to suffer more. And that's just awful.
that is, and unfortunately, I don't know, man. I hate to sound like I'm anti-government, but it seems like the powers that be aren't really thinking beyond their playground. I mean, they say they are, but it doesn't really seem like it. Because like you just mentioned, the people in those areas, they're going to suffer the worst, and there's no way around it.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to make this whole hour a real downer for those who are tuned in. What we're saying is what we're seeing, right? You and I are seeing basically the same story.
Exactly.
It's not a pretty one. And there's been a failure of leadership.
And just to ride tailgate on what you just said, if you want to be lied to, this is really not the show for you guys, I take pride in the guests that we bring on the show to be informative, straightforward, and give you guys real stuff, if you think the truth hurts, I'm sorry, that's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to give you really food for thought so you can go forward with your eyes wide open, not wide shut. So I just had to say that, Bart.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your book. Let's talk about your book a little bit, and then we can go forward. And hopefully, some of our listeners, if you have any questions or if you got any comments or would you like to join the conversation, please feel free to dial 646-929-2870. Press number 1 on your phone, and we'll be glad to let you jump in. All right. I'm loving the conversation, Bart.
Well, so am I, Lamont, and thank you for flagging my new book. It's called Learning from Tomorrow, Using Strategic Foresight to Prepare for the Next Big Disruption. And it's part of a series of books that was published by a fellow you just recently had on, just one more in the long series of really smart, stimulating people with some provocative ideas that you bring onto your show. And I'm talking in this case about Tim Ward of Changemakers Books. And he put together a series of books trying to point a way forward where we could start to develop a better world. A more socially just world where the economy wasn't just working or primarily working for those, in the 1%, and also addressing major environmental issues and challenges, whether it be, excessive consumption by consumers or climate change. And so series of generally short books right to the point with some clear ideas to try and generate some action. And so I was very fortunate to be invited to contribute here. And basically what my book's about is this concept of strategic foresight. And basically foresight is a way of a structured and systematic way of using ideas about the future to anticipate and better prepare for change. It's really about exploring different plausible futures and the opportunities and risks that they could introduce. And so using these tools and methodologies of foresight, we can use the ideas generated through the process to make better decisions and to take action. And we can ultimately, envision a preferred future. What do we want to move toward? And generally, foresight is used by different organizations. Some businesses use it, governments, other organizations, and they use it in circumstances of great change, of volatility, of uncertainty, and trying to get an idea of what's going to happen in about 10 years or more. So it's not for next quarter or next month. It's a set of tools you're using to try and get an idea what are plausible futures 10 years on, and looking then at what are some of these negative potential futures we want to avoid, and what are some of the good ones that we want to work toward. And in a nutshell, that's what it's about. About 1 out of 4 Fortune 500 companies have in-house capacity doing foresight work. An increasing number of U.S. government agencies are using it, and there are universities that are teaching it, like the University of Houston has a degree program in strategic foresight. And because of the shock of the pandemic and people were looking around at the changes that we experienced in such a quick time, and are concerned about what comes next. There's been a lot of new interest in this multidisciplinary approach to addressing the future.
Bart, again, boy, you got my mind jumping all over the place. You touched on the next question, which was this book for it, but actually it sounds like it's for everybody. And what I'm hearing, Bart, too, is that these companies and these corporations, they're thinking about what could happen in the future, and one way or the other. And it seemed like that's almost like a common sense approach. If you're running a business, wouldn't you want to use something like you're doing? And I like the systematic approach, and maybe everybody really, really need to gravitate toward that part, because as a business owner now, I'm always thinking about where I'm going to be in the future and what could or could not happen and what's been happening in the past that I don't want to see repeated regardless. I mean, does that make any sense?
Yeah, it makes great sense, Lamont. And you're running a successful ongoing business, so you obviously have to be thinking about what could come next, good and bad. I guess the nuance about foresight is it goes beyond what a lot of businesses use regularly. So they, especially bigger companies, they have their whole teams looking at risk management, and they're obviously doing forecasting. So, like, what are our sales going to be next quarter, or what might be a product we consider rolling out in 2 or 3 years?
Tim,
but not all of them
Tim, you mentioned something right there. You mentioned forecasting, and I think that's what I kind of lost too in what I was trying to explain. But forecasting with thinking about the future using your tools, do they kind of go hand in hand?
They sure do. And actually, forecasting is similar to and complementary to foresight, which is what I'm talking about. The difference is forecasting tends to be more of a shorter-term thing. You can take it a few years ahead, but it's often like, the Weather Service is trying to forecast the weather tomorrow and next week. The company, a big corporation, talking to its shareholders, they're predicting what their profit margin will be, in a couple of quarters. Governments are trying to assess, okay, what's water usage going to be like next year, or enrollment in school. And forecasting tends to rely on historical data and current numbers. So it kind of projects, it extrapolates from what we've already seen historically. Whereas foresight, it does not aim for precision. There's no a single prediction with numbers. It's more coming up with scenarios, a handful of scenarios of where things might go, again, with a longer time frame. Typically, not always, but typically a decade on. And so you're not going to find numbers in the way of a specific prediction, but a scenario that can alert you to opportunities and risks and what you should be preparing for in a scenario like a pandemic.
And you explain that so very well, man. I'm so excited to have you here. So Bart, what do you think? What new habits that people adopted during the pandemic that you think is going to stick with us?
Well, I'll be also interested in your take on this, Lamont, because a lot of us in these times have been doing a little bit of self-reflection. We've had a little time to contemplate, especially in the lockdown period. Where are we in life? What do we value? The things that are important to us. So, among the things that I think went away, and I'll tell you about things that are going to stay. I had mentioned about movie theaters, not disappearing completely, but kind of a continuing downward climb or fall, I should say. Neighborhood mailboxes.
Yeah, I remember drive-in theaters used to be everywhere.
Oh yeah. Actually, they got a little bit of a boost in some places because it was outdoors, and some places were allowing them during COVID. As long as people were spaced out, socially distanced. But yeah, I don't see those making a big comeback. But look, before the pandemic, the assumption was that if you're an office worker, and let's keep in mind, not everybody works in an office, but there's a part of the population that does. There's a sort of this assumption, okay, you get up in the morning, you have your coffee, and you drive or hop the train or bus, depending on where you are, and you go to the office, right? Well, that assumption is gone, okay? because we have been working from home. Again, office workers, those who can, not necessarily those in the front line serving food, delivering haircuts, healthcare, whatever. But for those going to office, we're not all going back in September after Labor Day, right? There are going to be new hybrid arrangements, and I could talk at length about that. I won't for the moment, but just to say this assumption that office workers work in the office, that's gone. Long, pointless meetings. I'm hoping, this is a bit aspirational, that those are mostly gone because people had a little less patience on Zoom. Meetings tended to be shorter. They also tended often to be more participatory. More people could join in. And so it's going to be hard to get people to sit through 2-hour meetings where there's a lot of blah, blah, and they're not well organized. Something else?
You're right.
Right?
People be sitting up there doing the meet and sleep.
Yeah. Something else I think we're done with is education and training without a digital component. So I'm not saying we're all going to be studying online, whether it's primary or secondary education, university or post-secondary, whatever. But it's going to be hard to get away from a digital component. So even as most schools go back in September, they go back to school in North America at least. You can expect that the experience with Zoom and with internet and with all kinds of other tools, including virtual reality, we're going to see more digital components in education and training. And maybe one other thing, just about what's disappearing, not coming back. I'd say business travel. Okay, again, it's not black and white, but we're going to see right now. It's going to take a while to get back anywhere near to the levels before because businesses realized how much they could get done virtually. And
right.
if you want to travel like to a conference or something that's in person, you're going to have to make a pretty big case because that's a big part of a company's budget. So some firms where they absolutely need to have interaction for sales or what have you, okay, they're going to encourage some people to go out on the road. But I think a lot of organizations are going to cut back on business travel.
Yeah, because it all goes back to that bottom line, the dollar, how it's spent, where it's spent.
Well, and you were asking also about what kinds of things are going to stick around, and I gave a hint of that with the digital component of education and training. Telehealth, we had the tools to do telehealth beforehand, but we were all accustomed to going to the doctor if we had adequate coverage. That's a whole other issue of lack of health care for many Americans. But for those who had it, they'd go see their doctor. And then in COVID times, we had to work remotely, right? It was either over the phone or over Zoom or similar. Well, okay, we're going to start going back to doctors' offices, but it's not going to be like before. There's going to be a lot more use of telehealth. And there's pros and cons to that, but it's sticking with us, in part because doctors like it. Where they're billing, whether they're doing telehealth, which is easier, moving from one patient to the next, and it's easier for them to work their way through a call in some ways. They're content with that, and health providers are content with it, and many people, they've gotten more used to it. Sometimes they really want to see a doctor, but other times, you don't have to, trudge across town and wait in a waiting room with people coughing. There are some advantages to telehealth, so that's going to stick with us. And I want to try and focus on the positive. My whole interest in strategic foresight and kind of future thinking is there's a lot of dark scenarios, but I'm focusing on what can be some of the positive things. And just talking about health a little bit, and thinking beyond the U.S. borders, we've seen drones being used more and more to deliver medicine and to provide patient sampling in areas, for example, in African countries, in rural areas without access to hospitals. And this took off during the pandemic. And that kind of positive development where we're using technology to help address health needs, this is something that's going to ramp up. And that's something that really gives me something, to be happy about, to be cheered that, human ingenuity and using technology for good.
I had a question, man. It was kind of off the cuff, though, maybe even beyond another page. But I was just wondering, in regards to water in some of these foreign countries and stuff, with all the things that we see on TV in terms of bad water, I was just wondering, we have the technology. There's desalination facilities on ships. I'm wondering, why is it such a big problem to get clean water to some of these places?
Yeah, there's a whole host of issues there, and it's a question that's kind of near and dear to me, Lamont, because although I'm talking to you from a part of Canada that has a lot of water, I mean, we produce a lot of hydropower here, right? So the energy that I'm using to charge my phone to speak with you today is renewable energy, and that's something else that excites me, but not every part of the world has that. And you were really getting at drinking water. Well, my roots were in the desert of Arizona. That's where I spent my youth. And in times since I left Arizona and the Southwest more generally, water crises have become more severe. Okay, so in that part of the world, you've had so much water being used by these large farms, and not always very efficiently. So they've, the Colorado River in some places is a trickle. So part of it is the geography and the weather, the climate, where you have issues of water access. Climate change is beginning to have an impact. We're talking about clean water, where you have, for example, in South Asia and in Nepal, countries that have there are ice caps and glaciers. Those are fading, and so you don't get the same kind of runoff and access to water. Now, in other places where you have lots of water, but it's not clean, and this may have been what you were getting at. Why can't we provide clean water?
From salt water, because like the Navy ships, the military vessels, they're using salt water. They're cleaning it.
Yeah, and something like 70% of our planet is water. So what's the problem? And a lot of the world lives within say 50 miles of a coastline near water. Well, the short answer is it's those desalination initiatives and projects. It's very expensive. You can do it. Countries are doing it. You say militaries are doing it. That's right. But it's really, really expensive. So it's no problem for Saudi Arabia with its oil riches to have desalination plants, right? Singapore, one of the wealthiest countries in Asia, they're doing desalination, right? And they're also taking sewer water, and they're cleaning it and turning it back into drinking water. So look, short answer is the technology is there. It's where is the market for it? Can the market do it, the private sector? And where the private sector can't or won't do it, is government going to step in and do it? And then you can ask yourself the bigger question, Lamont, is what inspires government to action? Who influences government? Who? Yeah, right. Is it the poor people without access to water, or anyway? I'll just ... You get where I'm going.
I think everybody with a portion of a brain can figure out the rest of that one.
Yeah. Well, look,
so Bart, you spent a lot of time in Asia. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this has been really formative in my life experience. I mentioned a couple of places where I'm living or grew up, but I spent most of the last 2 decades in Southeast Asia, in the Philippines, okay, and which, among other things, exports a lot of people. There are a lot of Filipino Americans, a lot of Filipino Canadians who have moved over time, and I had a fascinating experience there. I was working for an international development agency that was working not just in the Philippines, but across developing Asia. And actually, my experience working in that continent was a big stimulant, I think, for my interest in foresight and wondering about what the future might bring. Because Asia, in the time that I was out there, was going through one of the most dramatic transformations the world has ever seen. Social, technological, economic, massive transformation, fast-growing economies. The poverty rate was declining substantially. Growing middle classes. People were getting on airplanes and flying to other countries, whereas before that was an aspiration they couldn't dream of. So just when we think about Asia, a lot of times the talk centers around China because it's the big influential. It's a superpower, right?
Right.
But there's so much more to the region, including countries of Southeast Asia. So there I include not just the Philippines and Singapore, but countries like Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam. And those 10 countries that form what's called ASEAN, it's a collective of Southeast Asian countries, their economy, their collective economy, which is becoming more integrated, is going to be the fourth largest in the world by 2030. So we're talking a part of the world that is becoming much more economically important, in terms of geopolitics. The U.S., Japan, and China are jostling for influence in that part of the world. And you've got startup companies. There was one out of Malaysia that maybe about 15 years ago. They started as a ride-hailing app called Grab. It started in Malaysia, and in April of this year, it announced that it was through investments and fundraising, they were about to become a $40 billion company. They've become so huge. There's a great story I enjoy. I have to say, every once in a while, in moderation, I enjoy a little bit of single malt. Okay, I admit that, right? And the part of the world that's famous for single malt is Scotland, and so there's a one of the many distilleries there is called Jura. It was set up in 1810 by the Scots. It is today owned by a holding company that is Filipino. Okay, so what I'm trying to convey to you, Lamont, is that Asia's influence in the world is growing dramatically. I'm just talking about the economic side. We could talk about entertainment and culture, from movies to K-pop. We've been buying Japanese cars and Korean cars for years, and that kind of influence in America is going to continue to increase in the years ahead. And so that's one of the big trends that I follow, and it comes obviously from spending time out there.
Why that was brought by another question for you. Why do you think America's actually sleeping on that? It appears that they spend so much time watching the television and formulating their own opinions, and they haven't even left their backyard yet. They just see one picture, because they haven't traveled. That's what I'm saying. They haven't even left their backyard yet. So how do they form so many different opinions on China and Asia and some other countries? It's just kind of mind-boggling if you think about that. So it's great to talk to someone like yourself that's actually been there, that's been immersed in the economy and really know what's really going on. Because I see it too, and I understand it, because I'm a techie kind of guy, and I'm always looking at the new toys that's coming from that part of the world.
Yeah. And I mean, if we talk, for example, about electric cars, right? So our future, Lamont, to the extent that we're going to be owning cars, they're going to be electric. It's happening. It's happening really, really fast, right? And the country with the most e-buses, like for city transport, that's China. I mean, they're investing very heavily in this next generation of vehicles. The U.S. is getting around to it. The big players like GM and Ford, both of them have announced programs of investment of over $20 billion each, and transitioning to e-fleets. But this comes, after the lead of China, not the U.S., and actually Europe is ahead of the U.S. as well.
Oh yeah, I know that, because I've traveled in Europe, many years ago, and that's when everybody was having cell phones, and I noticed that people in Europe had free cell phones. When the people here in the U.S., maybe 2 out of 5 even had a cell phone. So it was just amazing, the technology that's available in other parts of the world. But again, if you don't leave out of your backyard, you really won't know until you know.
Yeah, maybe part of that is, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, is, people who grew up in the States, they may have traveled a little bit or not much at all. They're on this giant economy, which for, after World War II was the biggest. It was the largest, most influential economy and country in the world, right? And so you got this huge continent, and you can immigrate to another state, on this huge continent and work there. And so it kind of got used to the U.S. being number one at everything, right? And it's kind of hard to believe that countries that not that long ago were really, really poor. In the 60s, the lifespan of the average Asian in a developing country was not very high, and figures on maternal mortality, child mortality, hunger, et cetera, they were very disturbingly high. And for a variety of reasons, countries across that continent have motivated.
Tim, what happened? Did we lose you? Bart, did we lose you? Hello? Hello? Ladies and gentlemen, I think we may have a little bit of technical difficulty here. Hopefully, I guess we'll call back shortly. We're talking to Bart Édes about how COVID changed our lives for good, and we touched a little bit on some of the negative things, of course, and that's part of reality. You can't get part of that, and you have to know where you've been in order to know where you're going, and that's certainly the case here. But if you just joined the show, please be aware that you can hear the whole show in its entirety in a few moments. Bart, are you back?
Hey, Lamont.
Yes.
I am, and I apologize to you and our audience for checking out there. That's a little bit of tech difficulty. We're talking about Asia and how technologically sophisticated much of that region is. Well, I guess I'm not that tech savvy at the moment. Sorry about that.
No problem. We understand things happen and you a long way away. So that's part of the things we're talking about, the technology and how things happen. And, I'm one of those guys that remember, a 2-track player, 4-track, 6-track, 8-track, 24, 32, 64, the music industry, to watch technology change, and I hate one of the things that kind of went away that we kind of came back, but not really came back, and I'm looking at our government leaders and our city congressmen and all that. They took out a lot of music programs in our schools, and we have a lot more tech-savvy, computer-savvy students than we do musicians, so I kind of hate that. And then for as our really senior musicians, a lot of those aren't really tech-savvy, and like you mentioned earlier about how technology and the whole digital thing, we're going to be seeing a lot more than that, and I'm kind of sad in a way because of that, because I know a lot of people have missed that learning curve. But then I'm happy in another way because we got a whole another part of the world that wasn't very computer literate. They have to step up their game, with Zoom and a lot of other ways that they communicate. So anyway, I just want to throw that little 2 bits in there.
Well, and I have to agree with you about the loss of music programs, speaking more generally about art and cultural aspects in schools. Obviously it's important to learn, language and math and science and history, but what about the music? I mean, that's a part of all our lives. So I'm with you. I have, in my family, I have musicians who have dabbled professionally, and it's become harder, not easier, to make a living in the business, I think, but you would know better than me.
Oh, well, like I said, it just made them step up that learning curve in terms of how to, do the auditions virtually, play virtually, and opposed to how it, it used to be you can't do that. And I know a lot of people have been doing, concerts that way. They've been forced to find other ways to continue. And that's one thing like the pandemic did, it did to me. It made me start looking more at that man in the mirror, because we did tend to take a lot more for granted before the pandemic. But, when everything kind of shut down and you had a lot of time on your hands and you started trying to figure out what you're going to do with that time, and still be productive, So it made you get rid of a lot of stuff and adapt to, especially if you're true survivalists, it made you adapt to other ways to try to continue and forge ahead. So
Yeah, you got me thinking there, Lamont, about some other changes we may be seeing. There was a lot of reflection going on when people weren't stressing out, and a lot of people have been stressing out about what matters, right? What's important, and including human beings' relationship with nature, with the environment. I mean, something was off balance, right? We've got this virus spreading amongst us, right? And there's something off balance, and it's been the case even before the pandemic for a while. When you talk about extinction of species or deforestation, the pollution of the environment, and the bigger challenge of climate change. And, as tourism begins to come back, including international tourism, and it's going to be a little while before borders are completely open and stuff, I think you're going to be finding people seeking more of nature. There's been some anecdotal data on that already. And for those who have the means to, say, buy a plot of land or something outside the city dwellers who want to move to have a cottage or something in a more rural area. I know where I'm living, just as an example, and I'm not part of this group going off and buying a place, but I see people doing it, and the prices are soaring. And I think it's part of this trend of people wanting to reconnect with nature, to get away from the kind of the rat race. And this is reflected in other things too. A lot of people, like in the hospitality business, they talk about the great resignation. A lot of people quitting their jobs. They don't want to go back. Or those who have the luxury of being able to work remotely, digital nomads. They're going off to more pleasant surroundings, maybe saving some money. For example, leaving expensive Silicon Valley to live in a place where there's nature, mountains, or seaside that's not as expensive around the bay. So just to say that, this finding greater meaning, there's some of that going on right now, and people not just wanting to accept that the way we worked, for example, and lived before was exactly the way we want to work and live going forward.
Bart, they had to slow down, take time, and smell the roses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I guess,
well, I know I did that.
I guess they're seeing that this thing we call life is so fleeting, and I think that's an undercurrent to a lot of that stuff too. You do want to get away. It does make you think a little smarter, on how to enjoy, what's left within this situation.
Yeah, that's true. And I think you're also seeing that a little bit in the behavior of consumers. So, for example, there's growing popularity of meatless options. So, like Beyond Meat and such. These products that are not meat, but they simulate it for those who were not vegetarian or vegan. But some of them are thinking, this might be better for the environment and better for me. I think this pandemic, one of the other things that come out of it is increased attention to sustainability. And so this is where I identify myself as somebody with glass is half full. I think we've done some damage, and we're going to continue to see the kinds of impacts on the environment that we've been seeing, unfortunately, because of past actions. And I refer to, for example, these crazy record temperatures in the Pacific Northwest, the massive flooding we've seen in Germany and Belgium that's killed nearly 200 people. A lot of bad things have happened, but there's also a sense that we need to make some changes. And you have big banks, you have corporations making commitments about net zero targets, and governments taking firmer action. The EU, for example, European Union has just in the last few days strengthened its standards for vehicle emissions, and the Biden administration in the U.S. is expected to do the same. And consumers are expecting this when they want to see they're buying products from companies that are being more responsible, not just on the environment, but in the way they govern themselves and their approach to social justice and how they treat their workforce. So I do see some positive trends that I think may stick with us, that may end up saving us. If it's not, in some senses, too late given the damage done to the environment.
Right. Well, Bart, are those some of the things that gives you hope for us in the near future?
Yes. Exactly. And I come back to the topic of my book, Strategic Foresight. So, set of tools. You don't need to be, an expert who studied this for years. We can practice this in a small company or even in our family, basically just tuning into how things are changing around us and how these big trends might interact to create different kinds of futures that on the surface we may not realize are possible. So basically doing a bit of reflection and preparing for those possible futures. Some not so bright, some brighter. Yeah.
Whatever don't kill us make us stronger. That's for sure.
Right.
So what do you have next in store for you, Bart? I know, are you on a book tour? Are you going out to spread the word? Are you doing any speaking engagements?
Well, I'm doing a lot of speaking engagements at the moment. So talking to recently diplomats in the Washington area where I spent some time, Washington, D.C., to corporate officials at universities, talking about foresight and also talking about what we can expect in our near-term future and our longer-term future, and where people don't like what they hear about what may be coming. And I'm careful to, preface all this with, this is not written in stone. What happens in the coming weeks and months and years, not all of that is fixed. We can change it, and that's the empowering part. If we come together and decide we want to collectively change the course of events, time and time again, we can see that's possible, but it's helpful to know where some of these big trends are interacting that could create a world, for example, that's in an environmental state that's worse than today, where there's greater inequality and disruption, where there's conflict between major powers with different perspectives on the economy and liberty and that sort of thing. So I try to, I'm trying to highlight the tools we can use to understand where the future might go, while highlighting the possibilities to take action and actually change our course. And let me just mention there that an example of that comes out of San Francisco, right? So there's a nonprofit organization in the Bay Area that has been looking at the future of the Bay Area. And, this has become one of the most technologically sophisticated parts of the world. You got Silicon Valley and all that. And so they came together, civic leaders, business leaders, looking at what might the Bay Area look like in the year 2070. That's pretty ambitious, 50 years ahead.
Yes.
And they're asking themselves, looking at things like the economy, housing. I mean, you can hardly afford to live there unless you're making a fortune working for a tech company. Transportation issues, there's gridlock all over the place, and homelessness and major challenges. And so they are using scenarios, which are a big part of foresight, to see what are the different possibilities here. And some of them are not great, but they're using that insight, right, developed by asking critical questions, bringing in a diverse group with different perspectives, and looking at how some of these scenarios might play out, and then examining, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to change as society living in this part of North America to create a path for the Bay Area to achieve an economically strong, socially just, and environmentally sustainable future? And I'd really leave you with that thought, and highlight that that's a message I'm taking to different audiences is, we have it in our power. There are these tools. Let's invest energy into reflection on different possible scenarios coming about through different forces interacting, and then seize the scenario that we want and work hard to achieving that together.
Very well said, my friend. Very well said. I couldn't have said it better myself. Very well said. So, Bart, tell everybody how they can get in contact with you, how they can get a copy of your book, and all that great information.
Sure. If you type in my name, that's Bart, and the last name spelled E-D-E-S, Édes, which is no way you'd know that unless you were Hungarian. So type in Bart, Learning from Tomorrow. Do that on Amazon.com or visit your local bookstore, which hopefully is reopened, and you'll find the book there. And as far as reaching me, For those of you who are on Twitter, and if you're not, maybe you want to be, it's a good place to track trends in areas that interest you, whether it be music or environment or something else. Go on Twitter and look up at Big Trends Guy. Big Trends Guy. All together, one word, and that's where I'm at, and you can reach me there, and I'd love to hear your ideas about the future and how we can together formulate a more livable, sustainable, and inclusive one.
Bart, I had asked Mr. Tim Ward a question in regards to his book, so I'm going to put that one out there to you as well. Do you have, or do you have any thoughts of doing an audio book?
At the moment, no. Variety of logistical reasons and the timing of the book, which focused a lot on the crisis we're in presently. So, for example, it has some short-term scenarios, and I understand the value. A lot of people are using audiobooks, and let me just say that for the next book, when that comes, I could see easily weaving into that distribution plan in audiobook. So, but in this case, no, it's just the ebooks or hard copy.
Right. Okay, I've just thought I would ask, for those people out there that's on such a busy schedule, they don't have time to read, so they can listen to it.
Sure.
I understand. I definitely understand.
Yeah. Sure.
Well, Bart, I definitely enjoyed, the time we had spending. I want to open the door and definitely leave it open for you to come back and join us at any time. We definitely want to stay abreast of what's going on for those people actually have their eyes wide open, is paying attention, to the world. And hopefully those are asleep woke up during the show, and some of the things that you offered penetrated and give us some food for thought moving forward. So definitely, man, anytime, come back through. We'd love to have you. And I'm going to read your book as well, so I can be a little bit brighter and a little bit more intelligent on some of the subjects and some of the things that you spoke on the show today.
Lamont, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity for joining your program, which has been doing a fantastic public service and bringing new voices, stimulating thinkers and authors, making their thoughts available to a wider audience. Urge you to keep it up, and I will do my small part in helping to promote awareness of the program. So thanks so much.
And thank you so much as well, Bart. And I want to give a shout-out to Mr. Tim Ward for making everything possible and doing all the great things that he's doing. So with that being said, we'll see you guys next week, same time. And if you missed part of the show, it'll be available worldwide in the next 2 minutes. And if you have problems, get in the show and, like I always say, ask your mama, ask your daddy, ask your neighbor across the street, ask the at the gas station, corner, supermarket. Somebody will tell you where you could hear the show, so you have no excuse. And if all that fails, you can contact the office here at 323-957-7322, because we don't want you to miss this. And thanks so much for joining us. And go check out Bart Édes. Got good stuff going on. All right, see you guys next week, same time, 2:30 PST.
Yeah, old school. That's what I'm talking about. Listen, this ain't for everybody. Some of y'all need to hear this. I know you're in the trenches fighting, but check it out. I'm gonna put it down like this so I can help you things understand. Everything you're going through is all part of the master plan. Or what? You thought because you got saved everything was gonna be peaches and cream? You better wake up, son. Don't nothing come to a sleeper but a dream. Faith without works is dead. Read your Bible, you know what it said. He who don't work don't eat. Blackers don't get fed. Yeah, Jesus said, he who puts his hands to the plow looks back the same ain't fit. Some of y'all ain't been in the trenches 5 minutes and you about ready to quit. I ain't mad at you, I'm just hitting you with the real. If you died for me and I was still tripping, now how you think that make you feel? Check this out, deep game, this here's deep. Some of y'all ain't sawing nothing but you started trying to reach. But after him who is able to position fathers by his glory. Struggles might be part of your testimony, but it ain't the end of the story. Now the point is this was prophesied way back in the day. Choir, sing the hook right here and see if the church can relate.
I know we can make it. Oh, we can make it. I know good and well. I can work it out. Work it out. Work it out. Yeah, he'll work it out. I know we can make it. We
would Jesus do? Why you asking if he ain't trying to do what he's saying? He told you he was going to have tribulations, but you thought he was playing. 1 minute you tell him how good God is and can't nobody beat your talk. The next minute you're backsliding so fast, it's like you're moonwalking. Oh yeah, I'm preaching to myself because I ain't no better. It ain't like I've been following his every word, obeying it to the letter. So we soldiers, we got to remember that. Regroup, stay on point. Yeah, bow down, confess, repent, stay humble, let him anoint. It ain't easy as I thought it was. I'd be lying if I told you that. But it showed up getting better all the time. Trust me, that's the fact. Ain't nothing we going through that can't be handled. God put that on his tongue. Like they say, you can shout now if you want to, because the battle's already won. So while you're going through the valley, don't even trip. You're going to be on top. Choir, sing the hook line one more again. This time you don't stop.
I know we can make it. We can make it. I know good and well. I can work it out. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. He'll work it out. We can make it. I know we can make it. I know good and well. Oh, yeah. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. If you let him, I know good and well. He can work it out. 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 Oh, he'll work it out. Oh, I know we can make it. We can make it. I can work it out. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. He's gonna work it out for me. If you let him, I know good and well he can work it out.
Blessed are the poor.
Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yes, he can.
Blessed are those who mourn.
Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yes, he can.
Blessed are the meek.
Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yes, he can.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness.
I know we can make it. I know good and well I can work it out. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. I know we can make it. I know good and well I can work it out. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. If you let him, I know good and well he can work it out.